Thank you for coming. I know spending an hour talking about MLA citations is no one's idea of a super fun time, but we're going to try to make this as relatively painless as we can. My name is Claire Ehrlich, and my co-host is Jocelyn Ireland. We're both librarians here at MVCC. I'm going to put up a poll real quick just to see what everyone's kind of comfort level is with MLA style. And we've got, looks like people think they've written an MLA style paper before, but they're not 100% sure. So that's absolutely fine. It's a really good place to get started. Hopefully this session is going to help you a little bit with your confidence level. Let me go ahead and move on to the next slide and talk about what we're going to be doing today. We only have an hour, so here's what we're going to try to cover. Why it's important to cite your sources. I don't know about you guys, but if I know why I should be doing something, I'm more likely to care and try to do it right. Then we're going to talk about the features of an MLA works cited page and what a full citation in a works cited page looks like. Then we're going to talk about MLA Intext citations. And because we can't possibly cover all of the details in an hour, and none of us would remember or have any brain cells left if we tried, we're going to cover where to go to get more specific help later when you have a specific question with a research paper in front of you. Are there any questions before we get started with all that? Are there things that you're hoping to have answered today that I can keep in mind while we talk? Not seeing anything, so I'm going to move right along. So first off, why is MLA citations even important? Why do I need to care about all of these horrible little details? And there's three big reasons. The one at the top, get a good grade and don't get in trouble for plagiarism. You probably had like 30 teachers at this point in your life tell you that plagiarism is bad and you can get in trouble for it and you can get a bad grade and blah, blah, blah. And all of that is definitely true. And hopefully today we're going to learn the ways that you can avoid it and never have to worry about any of those terrible things happening to you. The two other reasons that I have up here, I don't think people talk about enough because they're the reasons that I find actually interesting. You cite your sources to help your reader. If your reader is really interested in a fact or idea that you use, they can easily go find that source and read it and learn more. They don't have to play detective or redo any of the research work that you did. They have all the information to just go find that source. Which kind of leads into the next thing. Research is a conversation. One person does a study or does some work and discovers something that they want to share. They share it with a research paper. Other people who are interested in that topic read that research paper. They might build off of what they did. And that's kind of how we all just move forward with human knowledge. That's how it happens. And since you guys are in college now, you are part of that scholarly conversation. You're help moving information forward. And so you want to cite your sources to show whose work you're building off of and let your reader build off of your work very easily and use it to continue to move the conversation forward. It's kind of like when you're in a live conversation, you say things like, oh, Marie, I totally agree with you, and also, or I think Alec is completely wrong about this because of this reason. Or you say something like, I think this is true, and Milo and Valerie agree with me. That's kind of how a conversation moves, and that's kind of how a research paper and the research conversation moves. This is how scholars have a conversation. So that's why this is important. You're participating in a conversation and you need to kind of speak the language. Moving right along. Any questions so far? I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So kind of moving into what do we cite and what don't we cite in order to avoid getting in trouble for plagiarism and in order to help your reader. A lot of plagiarism is accidental. People just don't realize that they're supposed to cite something, or they don't realize how they're supposed to cite something. By default, your reader is assuming that all the words and ideas that they're reading are coming from you, the author, until you tell them otherwise. So if something comes from outside of your own brain, you need to let your reader know. And you do that with a citation. If you copy and paste something from another source, that's a quotation. You need to put quotation marks around it so that the reader knows you didn't make up these words, someone else did, and then put a citation for that. Also, if you take just an idea from a source and put it into your own words, since you didn't come up with that idea, someone else did, you need to give someone credit for that idea, even though the words are yours. Things that you don't need to worry about citing, if it did indeed come from your own brain, if it's your conclusions, your opinions, your analysis, it came from you, and you don't need to cite that because your reader has that default assumption that anything that isn't cited is coming from you. You also don't need to cite common knowledge. Common knowledge kind of varies based on your audience. It's something you can assume pretty much everyone is going to know in your audience. If your audience is your next door neighbor, then you can probably assume that they know about the raccoons that are ransacking everyone's garbage cans on the street. If you're talking to your English teacher, you can probably assume that they know the definition of split infinitive because you've talked about it 17 weeks in a row in class. But like if you were talking to your neighbor about split infinitives, that's not common knowledge to them probably. And your English instructor likewise doesn't know about the raccoons. So common knowledge varies based on your audience. You need to know your audience to know whether something is common knowledge. And that's something that you can always ask a librarian about or ask your instructor, like, would you consider this common knowledge? Do I need to cite this? And either a librarian or your instructor will happily tell you. Any questions about that? Because this is honestly where a lot of the mistakes get made. So if you have questions about here, now's a good time to ask. All right. Moving on to citation styles. Today we're talking about...
Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. We have a hand raised from Jessica. I don't know if she wanted to unmute herself.
Jessica, if you want to
unmute. Hi, I just have a quick question. I am currently writing an essay that needs MLA citation. Now, one of the pieces that I'm trying to use is the plot to a movie. Mm-hmm. I don't know, is that common knowledge? Like, how do I cite that?
Has the whole class watched the movie together?
No.
Okay. I would probably put in some citations for that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, you bet. Excellent question. So citation styles. Some of you might have attended Jocelyn's workshop on APA style on Tuesday. And if you're anything like me when I was a college student, you're probably wondering why there even is more than one style and why they have to have all these different tedious rules that no one can possibly remember. Even librarians. I spent a lot of time staring at the citation book while I was making this presentation. And to be honest, I still kind of wonder about this, but here's the reasoning. Every discipline created rules that reflect what the discipline values and what the discipline studies. And they publish guides to those rules that everyone in the discipline follows, again, to make their reader's job easier. If you are an English professor, or even if you're like an upperclassman English major, you use MLA enough that you kind of know, like, oh, titles of longer works are always italicized. So if I see something that's italicized and looks like a title, that's the title to a longer work wherever this this source is a longer work, and this is where I would go to find it, is in this thing. It kind of helps you know what you're looking at. So when you're following all of the weird rules, you're kind of giving your reader what they expect, when and how they expect to find it. This here is a picture of the current MLA handbook. It's kind of the gold standard. It's the ultimate source for all things MLA style. The library has several copies of this at the reference desk that you're welcome to come look at. It is, despite being like the ultimate source, it's not the easiest thing to use. So MVCC, the Writing Center and the library have created an MLA style guide of our own that is kind of written for regular humans to read and understand. Jocelyn, would you mind posting a link to that in the chat when you get a chance? The library and the Learning Commons both also have paper copies of it available. If you're a paper copy kind of a person, you can come grab a paper copy, but it is online. And it is, like I said, it's written so that it's much easier to understand than flipping through this citation guide. So moving on to kind of how citation works. The goal of citation, again, is to leave the reader in no doubt of who's responsible for what words and ideas in your paper, while also not just like making a total mess of your paper by putting all of the information that you need to find a source right there in the body of the paper. That would get really ugly looking and hard to read really fast. So they're kind of trying to do a balancing act. Every citation style does that balancing act slightly differently. In MLA style, you include the source author's last name and the page number of like the information, whatever information you're citing. And you put it, right in the text of your paper, right where you used that information. And that's called an Intext citation because it's in the text of your paper. And it directs the reader, it's just like kind of a small note saying, go to the works cited entry and look for this. So you go to the works cited list at the end. It has all the information that you need to go find that source. And so you need to have, and then that in turn directs you to the actual source. It gives you all the information that takes you to the source itself. You have to have both, otherwise you are leaving your reader hanging. They don't have all the information they need. So let's kind of see an example of how that works in a paper. On the left here, we have a paragraph of someone's research paper in MLA style, and they have an in-text citation at the end where they found this information. Author's last name and the page number where they found this information. So if you flip to the end of their paper, we have a works cited entry here, and you can see, oh, we've got the author's last name. Scroll down to the author's last name. Here's all the information about this item. And you can use that to do a search in a library catalog or something to find this actual book. And you can go read that book if you are so inclined. Is this making sense so far? So let's start talking about what that works cited page at the end of your paper should look like. Most of the basics are pretty basic. Hopefully none of it comes as a great shock. Works cited page should be a separate page from the rest of your paper. You should start a new page. You should have the words works cited centered up at the top. Like the rest of your paper, you want it to be double spaced. MLA calls for a highly readable font. In practice, that's usually 12-point Times New Roman. And you want to have 1-inch margins all the way around, the same as the rest of your paper in MLA style. None of this is what Word defaults to if you're using Microsoft Word or Google Docs. Neither one default to this, so you do have to change the settings to get this. You want to begin each entry flush with the left margin. And then if the entry goes on to more than one line, every line after the first gets indented. You want to use a hanging indent. We'll try to look at how to do that later on. It kind of looks backwards from a regular paragraph. And then the works cited entry is alphabetized by the author's last name. Remember that their in-text citation has the author's last name in it, and so that is what your reader is using to go refer to your works cited page and find a particular entry. So you want to make it really easy for them to just kind of scan down the list and find the one that they're interested in. If there isn't an author for your source, the short answer is that you alphabetize that entry by the title of the source. There's kind of a longer answer that people don't like to hear, with some notable exceptions like government documents and some health information. Most credible sources, particularly if you're finding them on the internet, they really should have an author. If you're trying to do your works cited page and you have a whole bunch of things that don't have an author, you might not have so much a citation problem as like a credible, reliable source problem. So always kind of be on the lookout. Reliable sources are going to have most of the things that you need to cite them properly. Making sense so far? So if you are like me and you learned an earlier version of MLA style way back in the day, maybe, the current MLA style rules are kind of a pleasant change. They've simplified everything into a consistent set of these 9 core elements. No matter what you're citing, if it's a video like Jessica is working on, or if it is an academic journal article or a newspaper article or a book, you include whatever information you have out of these 9 elements in this order with this punctuation. You might not always have all 9 elements, but whatever you do have, you'll always put in this order. The thing that people find most confusing is title of source and title of container. It's kind of a confusing concept when you're first exposed to it. Title of source is whatever you actually have in your hands, whatever you're actually using. You might be using a poem. You might be using an article from a magazine or a journal or a newspaper. And that title is probably at the top of the page, right? That's the title of the source. Sources might be self-contained. They might be an entire book that you are using. You might be citing spots from all over one book. Or they might be contained within something larger. Your source might be the chapter, a chapter from a book. You only use this one chapter. It might be an article from a journal or a magazine, and that journal or magazine is going to be the container. If it's a newspaper article, the title of the newspaper that it comes from would be the container. And the container is just a larger thing that your particular source might be housed in. Does that make sense? That's really kind of a confusing concept the first time you see it. Any kind of a title in MLA style, you use title case like I did here. That means all of the principal words like title and source are capitalized. All the piddly little words like of or the or and are not capitalized. So much like you would see the title, it's called title case because most titles of books that you see out in the world are going to use this case. Then the rest of these other contributors might be illustrators or translators or editors. Again, you might not have that all the time, but if you do, you include them next. Version and number is going to look different depending on what kind of source you're citing, but it's just kind of specific information, particularly with periodicals like academic journals, magazines, newspapers. There's usually like a volume or an issue number that you would include next. The publisher and the publication date, and then the location again varies depending on what it is that you hold in your hands. Sometimes it's a page range if you use something that has page numbers. Often it's a URL or a DOI, a digital object identifier. A lot of journal articles have DOIs. A lot of them also don't. A URL if you found the source online, just where you found this thing and where your reader might go to find this thing. So that's kind of an overview. Let's look at how it really looks in a works cited page. Let's see if I can click on this and go to this is the Purdue OWL, is their online writing lab, is a great source for help with any kind of citation questions. They do MLA, they do APA, I think they also support Chicago. And again, they kind of write more the way regular people think than the MLA official style guide does. Here's kind of a sample works cited page that they've shown. Couple things you can see. They've alphabetized everything by the author's last name. Down here, there is one thing that there wasn't an author. It's a film, and they alphabetized it by author. Notice they didn't alphabetize by Anne because it's not really it's kind of a throwaway word. If we alphabetize by Anne or the, pretty much everything would be in the A's or the T's. So you ignore Anne and you alphabetize by inconvenient, I for inconvenience. You can also see there's two things that were written by the same author. When that happens a lot with MLA because often you're talking about things that a particular author has written, and so you might refer to 2 or 3 different things. You start the second entry with a dash, 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 and you alphabetize the things by title. So after Kyoto comes first, global warming economics comes second. You can see, I think this one, this one has one of those digital object identifiers. It's just a weird combination of letters and numbers. It's a unique identifying number for each item online. You're seeing that a lot more with academic journal articles. It's still really common to not have one, but if you do have one, you would include it here. Otherwise, you include a URL like this one does and a date that you accessed it. Questions so far? Anything you notice here that you want to talk about? You can see here we've got something that has a source and then a container. Here's the title of an article. That article appeared in the New York Times, so that's the container. It's italicized. Everyone hanging in there with me so far? I hope so, because coming up next, we have practice. I need to get out of presentation mode. Hold on a second. I'm going to have to minimize many things here. Hold on. Exit. Haha. All right. So the first thing that we are going to practice with, this is a print book that I went and pulled off the shelf here in the library. The Source of Self-Regard by Toni Morrison. Giving you a picture of the cover just because it's pretty and you can see what it is that we're dealing with. Most of the information that you ever need for a citation is going to be on the title page of the source if it's a book. So I gave you the title page here. Sometimes for the publication date, you might have to flip the title page over. And we're going to pretend that we're citing just this one particular chapter called Home from this book. So I went ahead and gave you all of the elements. Let's work together and let's try to put them in order to try to create a citation. What goes first? Which should I put in first?
Morrison Toni.
Sorry, what?
Is it Morrison Toni?
Yes, Morrison, Toni. It's going to go first. Morrison, T is APA style, if you're familiar with APA style. And this one is just plain wrong. I'm going to go ahead and delete both of them. What comes next?
Would be the source of self-regard.
Yes, we've got a few different options here. We're dealing with a book, and you always want to, whatever information the title gives you, you always want to include all of that. So the correct one is going to be the italicized one. Again, the big, longer works are always italicized. So this one If you see quotation marks, that means it's something shorter. This is not something short. This is like a 400-page book. And this does not have all of the selected essays, speeches, and meditations subtitle, so it's not correct. So let me do, I'm going to try to get fancy here and hope that Zoom works with me. Hold on one second. That's not right. I'm going to try to pull up the there we go. The 9 core elements again in order so we can look at that while we're working. Can everyone see both screens?
We're only seeing the 9 core elements right now. We're not seeing the other slide.
All right, hold on a second. I might have to stop sharing and how's that? Are you seeing 2 screens side by side now?
We are seeing 2 screens.
All right, back in business. So we've done author, we've done title of the source, which is also the title of the container. This work is oh, we have not. I'm sorry. I messed up. Because this is, we're just citing one part of a larger work. That part is the title of our source. And then we put the container. All right, so we've done steps 1 through 3. We don't really have any other contributors. We don't really have a version or a number. So what comes next?
The page number, right?
We still have, we are on this, the number is actually like a number of the item. A page number would go under location. So this is number like if you were, if you had, say, a journal, this really happens with like magazines or journals, where it'll say this is volume 5, issue 2. That's what that number is. So we're actually going down to publisher next. That's a good question. It's something that probably is pretty confusing to a lot of people. So the publisher is Alfred A. Knopf. We put that next. Oh, and Jocelyn just put in the chat page 31 in the citation guide, which shows you like a whole template of how to cite a chapter in a book, which is very helpful. Let me actually pull that up. That is what I meant to do. So here's what the citation guide looks like. So next, after publisher, we have the year of publication. Page numbers are the location. They go way at the end. Does that make sense to everyone? Anyone have questions about that? We're going to try to do another one. Oh, actually, first I wanted to show you guys, you may or may not be familiar, we have a citation generator within the library's catalog. And I want to show you guys how it works. It works pretty well, but these citation generators, because they are just kind of a machine doing this, they do make mistakes, so you do still need to know how to proofread them. So let me show you, I've pulled this book up in our catalog. If you do under Send To, there's a citation button. Click on that. There's MLA APA in Chicago, so you always want to make sure you have the correct one selected. And here is what it looks like here. Anyone notice any differences between what we did and what the citation generator came up with?
I see first edition in the citation generator.
Yeah, and that is, I looked that up because I was unsure about that. It's both punctuated wrong, and also if it's the first edition, you don't have to say that in an MLA citation. I guess probably you won't get marked wrong for doing it, but really you only need to cite if it's an edition that is different from the first edition. If you're using the second or third or fourth edition, then you need to say, otherwise it's just kind of assumed you're using the first edition. The weird punctuation here is what made me look it up. And that's when I learned, really, you don't need to include that. It's probably not wrong to do it, but anyone else see anything else?
The date?
Yeah, the date is weird. And that's another thing. I also looked that up because I was confused. I was looking at something that said it was published in 2019, but our catalog said 2020. You always use whatever the source itself tells you. Because the databases, as we can see here, sometimes just tell you wrong for whatever reason. That happens sometimes with particularly publication dates, sometimes with other things like every once in a while volume and issue numbers maybe. Always, if the source and the database disagree, go with what the source itself says. So yeah, it says 2020. I have no idea why. It's wrong. And this is also, it's citing the entire book. Obviously, it's not citing a particular chapter, so we had to include that more specific information about which pages we used and the title of that chapter. But otherwise, it did a pretty good job. So you can see it's a good way. You can just kind of copy and paste this and then make some fixes, and it'll save you some time. But you do want to make sure you're making those fixes because the robots have not quite conquered this area of our world yet. So let's try one more example. Let me go back to having the I can only see like certain parts of my screen and it's really irritating. Hold on a second. So this is, as we can see, it is an academic journal article that I found in one of the databases. And you can find in the citation guide, page 27 is where it gives you a template in the citation guide for that. Which page am I on? 28. Journal article from a database. We've got a template right here. We also have the information that this source gives us itself when you look at the first page of it. That's usually where you'll find most of the information on an academic journal article that you need. So here's all the stuff plus a few red herrings for this one. What do we always start with? What goes first?
We always start with the author's last name.
Yes. So that would be Mark Tabone. He's the author of this particular source. Toni Morrison is the author of the thing he's talking about. And what goes next? So here in the template, we need the title of the article, and it's probably going to be in quotation marks. So that would be this. This one is italicized. If it's italicized, someone's going to think that it's the title of a book or a whole academic journal or something, and that's just not right. So let's get rid of that. All right, we've done the title of the article. Next, what do we do?
Volume number.
We still need, because since this is in quotation marks, that probably means that it's contained in something else. This is something short. It's within something long. We need a title of a journal. If we go back and look, this thing says in very small font that it's in the African American Review from summer 2016. So that's what we need, and it's the container, it's the big thing that this article was published in. So that comes next. We're going to do our hanging indent here. And to tell everyone, this is a large work. It's italicized. So we've done title of journal. Now we need that volume and issue number. Put that next. And again, this was on the source. I pulled it from all of this fine print down here. All right, we've done that. Date of publication. Summer 2016. And what comes next?
Page range.
No, we need to know we found this journal. We found the right issue. Now we need to know which page to flip to. So now we're into that, we're into all the location information, and we just follow the template. Next we need the database name. This is stuff that you would need to actually go to the article for. Let me pull the article up real quick. So you can see where in the database you would see all of this stuff. So here's kind of the information. If we click here, we'll get the full text of the article. But all of this information is what's going to help us right now. We've got the page range. Our template says that the next thing we need is the name of the database. It actually defaulted to Academic Search Alumni Edition, which isn't actually the database I found it in, but the name of the database we'll just put down here. Template says next we need DOI or URL. So let's go back and look and see if this thing has a DOI. It does. If there is one, it's going to usually be in all of this kind of information about the article. Sometimes it'll be in the article itself. It doesn't seem like it is very often. But EBSCO will always have it right here. So we'll just copy and paste that monster into our entry. And then last thing we need is the date that we accessed it, just in case that information might have changed. I accessed that a couple days ago. I think MLA says that this date of access is kind of optional. Most instructors seem to really want you to do it though. MLA says to only do it for things that are likely to change. So things that you find on the open web that kind of seem like they might go away in a day or two or get edited in a day or two. You want to put your access date so that your instructor knows, oh, it might have changed because they accessed it 3 weeks ago. I would just go ahead and always include it. More information is better than less. How are we doing on time? I want to make sure we get to Intext citations. So why don't we go ahead to that. I'm going to go back to presenting. So those in-text citations, when you're citing something right where you use it in the text of your paper, They always have two elements, as we've talked about, the last names of the authors and the page number. If there's only one author, then you can cite it a couple different ways. You can cite it all at the end. This is kind of how our example earlier also did it. Just in parentheses right after you use the information, Ehrlich, page number 3, in parentheses. That's totally correct. You could do that every single fact for your entire paper if you wanted, but it can make your paper flow a lot better if you use signal phrases, if you kind of incorporate some of the information into what you're writing. So in the second example, it says, Claire Ehrlich said that the recommended font for MLA style is 12-point Times New Roman. And then all that's in the parentheses is that page number, because that would be kind of hard to elegantly write that in your paper. But this way it's, this person said, and your reader knows, oh, I'm looking for what this person wrote about. I need to go to the E's of the works cited and look for what this person was writing. So that's if you have one author. If you don't have a page number, that comes up a lot with things that you find out on the open web in particular, just don't include anything. You can only work with what you got. If you have two authors, you always cite the last names of both. You can see I've got, here's one of the kind of using a signal phrase. Ehrlich and Fry discuss the importance of citing both co-authors in Intext citations, page 3. Or you can put it all in the end in parentheses, Ehrlich and Fry 3. They're both correct. It's just kind of whatever works best in your paper. It's very common to use kind of a combination of both of these methods just to kind of make your paper flow better. And that's something that the folks in the Writing Center are really expert at helping you with. If you have questions when you're writing, that is something they would be delighted to talk to you about. In text citations, if you have 3 authors, 3 authors is the point where the editors of MLA Style are like, okay, this is getting ridiculous. You don't have to write all of this every time that you're citing this source. So you would just cite the lead author, the first author that's listed, whoever comes first on the source itself. You would list their last name, and then you would say et al, et space al period. And that's Latin for and others. So it's just a short way of saying Ehrlich and some other folks. Ehrlich et al discuss how to cite works with 3 or more authors, and using that signal phrase. Or in parentheses, it would look like this at the end of your paper. Any questions about that? Is that making sense? So what do you guys think we would do if there was no author? The hint is you're pointing your readers to the works cited entry. So you remember what you do in a works cited entry if there's no author? So on your works cited page, if you don't have an author, you alphabetize by the title of the work. And you would do the same thing in your in-text citation. You can shorten it up a little bit as long as your reader has enough information to find the right title in your works cited page. You can kind of do just part of the title if the title is very long, but you would do the title in that in-text citation as well to direct your reader to the right entry in your works cited page. Finally, some helpful tips that are just kind of generally useful. Always reread your assignment and pay attention to any specific instructions that your instructor gives you. Some instructors want you to do things slightly differently from the way that MLA strictly requires you to do. And you want to, when in doubt, follow what your instructor says because they're the ones giving you a grade. So make sure you're doing everything that they want you to do. And then when they're not saying specifically, use MLA Style, the MLA Style guide. Like we said, cite everything that you get from another source. Related to that, my tip is to add your in-text citations as you're writing the body of your paper. when I was an undergrad writing papers, by the time I always left this to the end, like going back and adding the citations afterwards. I was tired. The deadline was in like an hour or whatever. I didn't really care anymore. I just wanted to be done, and I would get sloppy. And when you get tired and sloppy and don't care anymore is when you lose points or accidentally forget to cite something, or you don't edit the citations that you get from a citation generator and you lose points on stupid things that you knew how to fix but just didn't care anymore. So add those citations while you're writing. It's a lot less pain in the end. If you're going to use a citation generator, use a reliable one. The one that is in the library's catalog that I showed you is usually pretty good. You might just have to fix a couple little minor punctuation things. Otherwise, it's pretty good. Always double check. There are some kind of lousy ones out there. And when in doubt, if you're not sure whether to include something, it's better to put way too much information in a citation than it is to put way too little information. You're trying to help your reader. Give your reader as much information as you can if you don't know what you're supposed to do. So we've got just about 10 minutes left. I want to tell you guys where to go to get more help and give you an opportunity to ask some questions now. Like I said, the library does have some copies of the MLA official style guide at the reference desk. You're welcome to come borrow one of those and use it in the library for a little while, whenever you want. I really recommend the printed out or PDF MLA style guide that's online that MVCC has created. It's much more user-friendly. You can just grab a copy or look at it online anytime you want. The Purdue OWL that we looked at briefly when we were looking at the sample MLA Works Cited page has a lot of really good resources on MLA. It's also kind of written more for regular people than the official MLA style guide is, so it's a really good free resource. And the librarians and the folks in the Writing Center here at MVCC, this is what we do, is we help students with this. It's what we're paid to do. I think I speak for everyone in both places to say that we really like getting paid, so please come ask us questions. We will be happy to help you wade through all of the details of MLA style, APA style, anything to do with writing and researching your paper. So that is all that I have. What questions do you guys have now that we have gone through all of this?
Feel free to unmute yourself if you want to ask anything. Claire, could we maybe do an example for a website?
Sure. Let's do, hold on, let me get out of this. So let's do, let me create us a blank slide here. And this over here. Let's say that we want to cite what do we want to cite? Let's say we want to cite this this beautiful infographic, this beautiful web page here. And let's find work on a website. Here's our template. First thing we need is the author's last name and first name if we can find it. So let's see. The only thing that I'm seeing is up here, the undergraduate library. So let's see. What does our lovely guide say? The author of the work is an organization, and that organization is also the publisher. Start the entry with the title of the work and list the organization as the publisher. I think that's probably what I would do in this case. So let's start with the title. Usually that's going to be up the top of the page of the website. Whatever is up top is probably going to be what you're going to be using. So we're going to say the information cycle. And we're going to put that in quotes. All right, looking back at the template, what do we need next?
Title of the website looks like.
Title of the website. So I think that is probably going to be undergraduate library. Publisher of website, that's probably going to be, this is the University of Illinois, ultimately. I think that's what I would put for that. You did unitalicize. Date of publication, if we can find it. Let's see. Usually it's going to be up at the top or the bottom of a website. I'm not seeing anything.
Yep, I don't see one either.
So we're just going to leave that off. We are going to put a date that we accessed. So there will be some information about when this thing was available on the internet in our citation. So we're just going to skip over that because we don't have it. URL, that we have. Copy and paste that sucker. And you put a period after that. And then you say accessed and day, month, year. So that's different from how you might be used to writing the date. Today is the 8th of October, which I cannot type. 2020. The end. I would need to try to get this thing to have a hanging indent and be double spaced. Both of those things are really hard to get Google Slides to do, but just know that that's what I would need to do if I was working in a works cited page. Make sense to everyone? Anyone have any questions about anything we've talked about today? Because we are almost out of time. I did want to do one last poll just to see whether this workshop helped anyone or just confused you further. So if you would please answer how you feel. And thank you again, everyone, for attending. I know that there's just not really a way to make this stuff fun, but it is really important to know. Oh, you're very welcome. And like I said, we will be making the recording available. It takes a little while to get a video of this size uploaded to YouTube, but we will do it as quickly as we can, so you can always go back and look at it later. And go ahead and end the poll. And everyone learned at least something useful, so that makes me feel good. Thank you. All right, so I'll go ahead and stop recording, and thank you again, everyone, for coming. If you have any questions, please do. Wait, don't leave yet. I was going to send you, got a lovely handout for everyone that has links to some of the things we talked about. kind of the list of the 9 core elements, some how-to videos, where to get more help, links to book a writing center appointment or to talk to a librarian. Again, we really like helping students with this stuff. Please feel free to ask.